Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm Christian Harris, your host and the founder of Slip Safety Services. My guest today is the second in our mini-series in association with HSE People, and therefore it's a fellow member of the HSE People panel that's joining me, and his name is Tom Baines. As you'll hear, Tom has had a very interesting experience over the last decade plus over in the Middle East, and in fact that's his area of specialism for the HSE People panel. So we talk a lot about that, and we break down some of the achievements he made, some of the challenges he faced, particularly around standards and practices and culture in terms of people's approach and mindset towards safety over in the Middle East. Then we turn a little bit to things over here in the UK as well, and Tom's relatively new consulting business, what it is, what it does, who it's for, etc. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. It's always interesting hearing about different cultures and different attitudes towards safety and how to overcome those battles, because we have those battles on a daily basis in whatever sector, whatever company, whatever country. So getting some perspective on those kinds of things is always valuable. If you do enjoy the show, please give us a like or comment on social. Please hit subscribe, and please give us a review, because that helps to spread the word to like-minded people who would also get a benefit from it. With that then, let's get into it and join my conversation with Tom Baines. Welcome to the podcast, Tom. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Shared a few war stories off screen about how we're doing, but yeah, can't complain.
Yeah. Well, at least we've got the weather going with us at the moment. So,
yeah.
I think we've got one of our fellow group members keeps giving us the weather forecast for the future, and we keep telling them to virtually shut up on the LinkedIn there, don't we?
Oh, Dean, yeah, I know. He's, he loves his weather forecasting. He's in gritting, so I suppose it's important to know what the weather's going to be doing. But
maybe one day
when we're in the height of the start of summer in June, and he starts talking about it's going to be a bad winter. It's like, oh no, we don't want to hear that right now, Dean.
Well, I think it's called planning ahead, isn't it? I mean, one day I'm sure in 20, 30 years time we could be gritting in the summertime, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could well be. But you've obviously come from living over in a place where you wouldn't be doing much gritting at all over in the Middle East. How was your time over there?
Oh my God, you'd be surprised. You might have not to grit sometimes. We did have, I think, a real blasting of snow 5-6 years ago in Dubai. The orange desert looked white. It didn't last very long, but it was one of those things that came off the harsh mountains from sort of Oman area.
Yeah.
But yeah, 13 years in the Middle East. Quite a testing time. Average temperature of 50 degrees. Well, most summers. Overnight temperatures of 35 degrees. So you can imagine, pretty much in the summertime it was pretty horrendous. But it was, for me, an amazing time, absolutely amazing time. When I first went out there in, I say 13 years ago, I went there to work on a project for my company, which was EC Harris at the time, now Arcadis, to work on the gap analysis for the government of Abu Dhabi to develop health and safety departments. A very similar model to health and safety executive in the UK. Yeah. That was quite an eye-opener, really. It's we had to survey around about 50 projects. When you look at projects here and you think, oh, that's a big project. When you go over there, it's like, oh my God, how big is this project? When you look at a project like in this early days Ferrari world, look at that in its infancy, and to infrastructure projects that are stretching 70 kilometers of pipeline, or and I think I said this one time on probably WhatsApp, was probably what's one of the scariest moments of your life is going up 90 floors on the outside of a building on a hoist, on Sadia Island. And when you get that far up, you are rattling, and you've got the wind, And I'm thinking to myself, how many times in history has a hoist fell from the sky, and it's, but, that project itself was probably only one project of its kind. To actually, where I think legislation's developed itself over years and periods of years, be from the Factories Act, the Health and Safety at Work Act, to the Australians stealing what the UK did, and and then you've got various versions around the world, to start from scratch. Great project. We got, for me, it was a very quick learning curve. How to work and live in the Middle East. How to take, as the client says, your success is my success. So you think, okay, we'll give that one to you. Meet some great people, and for me, that first year was tough because I went 3 months ahead of my family. I brought my family across with me. They came a little bit earlier than expected. So I think, trying to fit into a job, then bring, my wife and kids. My kids were, I think, 2 and 3 at the time, so whole new world, totally whole new world. I rented a villa which wasn't finished, which was not a good starting point. It was a brand new villa, and they'd hardly got the gates on it or the air conditioning fully operational, and moved my wife in there and hardly any furniture. It was a bit of an eye-opener, tough, got easier over the years, but never gets easier in the Middle East. Moving on from that, my key role really was, again, sticking with, I moved over to another company called Atkins, which most people know of, to implement that same project that I just talked about a little bit earlier. And then, become the director with Arcadis, looking after their whole portfolio of projects. We're talking, billions of pounds worth of projects, right across 7 countries in the Middle East. Being part of a board member there, decision making. We've had some horrific times in that company, some horrific projects. If you ever ask me about the worst moments of my life, I'll tell you about that one. And moving over from, I got, 9, almost 10 years with Arcadis there, and I got stale, even though, we were part of an organization of 27,000 people, and I wasn't just regional director. I was actually, obviously reporting to executive board, and then working with 7 other regions to develop systems and processes. Integration of new businesses when they were bought, Hyder was one of the biggest purchases that they made, and integrating that into the business. And you get to a certain point where, you've done everything you think you can do. And I moved over to a more Arabic company with, 7,000 people, 13 countries, brought in there to build a whole new regime for them, a whole new system, a new way of working. All 13 countries work separately. So you imagine sort of, the first year of that was quite a tense time, getting to know people, getting to understand the business, when they're working in places like Iraq and, Lebanon and some of these other countries, and what I just taken on, and just, but we made some great changes there, and then along came COVID. I think my family had already left. When I'd finished up with Arcadis, they'd left. I moved over to a company called Khatib Alami, and I decided sort of when we got to the COVID bit, life was too short. Spent 6 months of track and trace, keeping the company operational. They didn't even know what crisis response was until I showed them how to do it. When you keep a whole company operational and you get fully paid for it, I think that is some achievement in its own right. Even the CEO just was on my back and asked me, how the hell did you do it? And I said, it's called talking to people. And talking to the clients and saying, we can do this remotely, we can do it this way, So, there's a lot of projects, we've always seen, when you're talking billions and billions of mega projects, failed projects, you know, to the world's tallest tower, which is nowhere near the world's tallest tower in Jeddah. You know, Jeddah Tower in Saudi. I think it's something like 76 floors of core at the moment, after about 5 years. So yeah, some tough times. You know, some tough times, but the culture so different, so different.
Yeah, and we obviously met through the HC People panel. And I'm trying to get most of, if not all, hopefully, of the panel members onto the podcast. And your specialist area is, if I'm correct, talking about the Middle East, isn't it, in the panel?
Yeah.
So I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, because spill all your learnings out today. But we can go through some good stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say? That's obviously a really in-depth level that you got into there. But what would you say would be the biggest kind of differences between, managing health and safety in the Middle East versus, and I guess that might depend and vary by country, but versus, here in the UK?
Well, if you look at most sort of Middle Eastern countries, I think particularly when you go back as far as when the GCC was formed, they all took on a very similar approach to labour law. So it's just one law, which is pretty much duplicated across most countries, be it Oman or Qatar or Saudi or UAE, even as far as Lebanon, and that labour law was the baseline for pretty much everything. And it did mention occupational health, and looking after people, etc. But it didn't go into any real specifics. So, that was always the baseline people worked off. But when you had the boom years, I think in the Middle East, you had all of the big major construction companies coming in there, your Boguses and, your Carillions, etc. And they brought their own systems with them. They brought the way to work. So you would always find, a bit UK, a bit of hybrid from, Australian regulations.
Yeah.
A bit of the old OSHA in there as well. And over a period of time, as things evolved, and you find sort of the UAE evolved more than the other countries, and I'll explain Saudi in a second. But and you had, obviously with Abu Dhabi, they set their baseline and they based off, pretty much a hybrid of UK and Australian. But obviously systems based around OSAS 18,001, 9,001, 14,001. When you sort of get to Oman, well, labour law just counts and that's it, but they still use a lot of hybrid, from the UK. So a lot of people took UK legislation as the key baseline. Saudi was probably the trickiest one, where again, you would see elements of, the UK baseline, but if you looked at Aramco, they sold BP. Yeah. So anything they worked with, it was a BP base. Same was with ADNOC, which is an Abu Dhabi oil company as well. Yeah. So they would take known standards and just adopt them. With Saudi, they're developing now so much more. When you think now they're into giga projects, when you talk about giga projects, you look at NEOM or the Red Sea project, and I think, Red Sea project's 33,000 square kilometers of development, which is the size of Belgium.
Yeah.
And trillions of dollars of oil money is going into these developments, to turn it into tourism. Yeah, tourism clusters with their own borders. Yeah. Now, obviously, you work within borders. That's a massive change for Saudi, because when you have a border, you need a visa to get in. And Saudis need visas to get in. But then you start seeing the beer bars, the bars, and the gambling and all of that. And that's the only way forward for them. But with Saudi, they started to look at how do they achieve it. And they use a baseline system called Mashruat, which is white book, which only came in the last couple of years, which is baseline standards. And then people have to develop off those standards. And the standards were written by Brits. Yeah. So you see the elements of the UK standards in there. But, and it says you must do this, you have to do things this way. So they bring a level of consistency, but they don't necessarily tell you how to do it. So if I was to run, a PMO for Red Sea, you'd take those standards and then you'd build them out, to suit the actual project. And you find with most Saudi projects, many Brits are actually on these, that are heading up all of these.
Right.
So I see, Saudi getting pretty much more hybrid, of UK regulations, but they're still, again, they've not really consolidated anything into law over there. We may see that in the future, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. So almost driven by sort of capitalistic market forces more so than
And reputation.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about Qatar, and again, throughout my, I worked on some significant projects, and, I was an advisor to the government. So while I was doing director role for Arcadis, they needed somebody to go in and advise a client. And, when you're talking of overseeing, I don't know, £3-4 billion worth of projects that other people were actually delivering, the PMOs, so it could be Fleur or Parsons or anything like that. And I was advising the client, well, we do it this way. So I was his advisor and making sure these guys were following the things that shouldn't. It was a conflict of interest because one of the PMOs was my own company. Yeah. So I was into all sorts of instructions, non-disclosure agreements. My company asked me, Tom, what's going on? So I can't tell you guys. So I'm NDA'd. Still to this day, I'm on the NDA. And they had a specification called Qatar construction specification, which was a real mishmash with UK regs. And relatively, when you try and adopt a standard of that level, you can't implement it.
Right.
You just can't, because the culture is not mature enough. The systems are not mature enough. You state a specific standard for scaffolding. Well, God, they haven't even got that in the country. How can you state something? When you can't do it. And I got involved with updating those. Because I had the whole planning supervisor in there, etc. And it was actually, I advised the guys it was actually a rewrite was top you needed.
Right.
Yeah, rather than trying to botch up it. I did my best for them. Did that, and then they re-released those. And again, it's a hybrid, but it's something. Yeah. But Qatar, they got a lot of unfair press. For years and years, because obviously the 2020 World Cup
stuff,
but the news stories are nowhere near, the absolute truth. There wasn't 5,000-6,000 dead people by the time the World Cup's going to get built. We do lose people in construction. Qatar had its reputation on the line. They were building, camps, like holiday camps for the workers. And you had a lot of British companies running a lot of these projects, and their morality and their ethos and their, their moralities would never allow that to happen. So again, say it's a funny, fickle place, but when you get really down to it, as long as Australian UK standards are OSHA to a degree, you can get on fairly well. The hardest part was the culture and the people and changing their mindsets.
Yeah. My father-in-law, he's in Dubai now, but he's lived in. He was in Kuwait when the Gulf War was taking place, and he's lived in Abu Dhabi and various other Middle Eastern countries as well. And the impression I get from him is that a bit like India, I suppose, there's this kind of almost like a caste system where if you're a local, you're of a certain standing, and if you're a Western expat, you're of a certain standing which is a bit lower than that. And then if you're of an expat of a different background that's maybe not Western, you're sort of another level. And so the cultural mishmash there is really interesting, I suppose. And obviously when you're doing projects and the people doing the doing are likely to be in that third category. So it's kind of how do you overcome those kind of cultural blockers, I suppose, about equality or seeing people in the same way.
It all comes down, and then that hierarchical system exists all over the Middle East. I think you saw more of it when I first went there to you do these days. I think become very much more westernized and then in the approach to things. But I think it all comes down to people skills and time. It's taking the time out to teach people the way you want them to work and the ethos of the company in general. What are the objectives and goals, and what standards do you want to apply? And taking the time out to teach those people that actually were supervising the work. Let's just use the word supervising the work, as managers or directors, it doesn't matter. Because what they did reflected to how the workers worked. So their mannerism, when you have some projects, I think probably the biggest one I was on, we had 9,500 people working on the project. How do you teach 9,500 people what to do and what not to do? Some of the guys that come into the country never picked a hammer up in their lives. And get them to be carpenters. So when you see the way a lot of projects are set up with, and very different to the way you would see it here, where you'd have 70 years of supervision on the project site. You'd have the foreman, the supervisor, the assistant supervisor, and he tells him, and then you've got this guy on the ground actually watching what these guys are doing. Some companies are very good. Carillion was very, very, very good, obviously because they would design, build or contracting. They'll bring the people in, train them, or give them the basics and then pick out the guys that can do a particular job. And manage them on site. And you always knew who they were because some would wear the yellow overalls, some would wear green, some would wear the blues, obviously, which denoted they were the new guys. And, so you tended to see what was going on there. But I think it was, more about the very, very close supervision. Language barriers were a problem. But we all know the most powerful signs in the world were ticking across. If you put a ticking across against photographs, do this, don't do this. It makes a big difference.
And did that sort of manifest itself into kind of similar types and volumes of incidents that you'd see, in a project in the UK or in the US or something like that, or were you finding that, you had more of certain types of incident because of those kind of issues?
Fatalities did happen, but not as many as you would think. And this would be based on, the health and safety community at my level is a very close community, and we all talked. So we all knew what was going on, or what was what was right, what was wrong, or if they need any help or any advice. It was a very good community that way. The accident rates was significantly lower, would you believe, than baseline against the UK.
Perhaps driven by the supervision, maybe.
Driven by the supervision. Again, I can only really speak more from my projects or the companies I work for and the companies that were employed to deliver the projects, but maybe that was the ethos of what we drove through. And you had, again, a lot of big Western companies and American companies there that would drive the same ethos through. But, if it was a particular Arab company, and I'm not using the word loosely, they may not see the benefits of what we did because, inshallah, and, that sort of attitude, these things do happen. But I do believe the incident rates were much, much, much lower. I could quote figures off the top of your head if I knew beforehand. I would say, having 1 year when we were tracking what we were doing because we needed to baseline to see how we were performing as a business with the contracts we were running. We were hitting 80, 90 million working hours. We may have had 2 or 3 fatalities 1 year. But when you start looking at the lost time injuries or reportables, if you want to look at them, they were much lower than you would expect. But when you've got companies saying, well, you will go on site, this is your main PPE, this is your basic PPE, glasses. You needed safety glasses because of dust and sand. Your hard hat, your coveralls and all of that. Then, they did limit the exposure to some of the issues. But again, I think the supervision drove, the need, to minimize that.
Makes sense. And you mentioned it there, the inshallah sort of attitude. I mean, how do you overcome that?
You throw them off.
Right.
Literally. you do that, that where you have that lack of caring. Yeah, and I use the word caring because you have to. If you don't care, you don't do the job. You just pick on them and you just get rid of them, and as a PMO or PMC or the main, the supervision body, we have that right to do that. And the amount of people where you said no, that's it, job done, out. It's simple as, I wish the UK would do that a lot more, to tell you the truth.
It'd be interesting if we could do that with anti-vaxxers and so. We don't want to get too political, but. To be fair, true. We should be able to do that, it's tough to do that, because ultimately you could lose the guy's job. But if he's putting people at risk, then you can't have that. Well, it's something I talk about when I talk about safety and risk success. One of the points that I make there is spelling out the consequences, but good and bad. So in other words, to try and get people on board with putting safety at the heart of what you're doing, you need to explain why and what's in it for them. But equally on the flip side, if somebody is, acting against that and willfully and knowingly, not in alignment with what you want to achieve, then you've got to take action again, to root that out, because those bad apples will have consequences.
I think you're only as good as the people that you have around you, and perfect example when Arcade acquired Hyder. This was probably another worse situation. We had, after a period of time, we looked at the health and safety team. I looked at the health and safety team and found quite a lot that really weren't capable. Yeah, and there were bodies in the room. Yeah, so they had to go. And I would do it time and time again. Because if you want to drive the importance of health and safety, you can't have people in the business that aren't capable of delivering what the company ethos is, what you want them to achieve. And when these guys are at the forefront of these mega projects, then if they're not performing, the project's not performing. And people are going to get hurt. At the end of the day, that's what we're there to do. We're there to stop that.
No, exactly. And that's the sort of thing that's probably is more difficult in a more employment sort of law regulated society such as this one, I suppose. But so that's perhaps one advantage, and perhaps that helped as well in terms of your lower incident rates. If you're able to kind of get rid of those the bad apples more quickly, that probably helped as well.
Well, you had to, and you bring in the good apples, and you tempt these people in, and for me, I wouldn't ask someone to do, we all know this, I wouldn't ask someone to do something I wasn't willing to do. Despite me being a senior director in the business, I was out on site, I was getting my butt sweaty, I was using Sudocreme after to get rid of the bloody chaffs on my skin, but there's a classic example of one person I employed, and you look at CVs, but you look at experience, and you see all of that, but you want to meet the person. When you meet the person, you've got a good idea. Brought me into the office, sat him down, and I can't swear on this podcast, can I? You
can if you want to, don't worry. We've had swearing before. And
my first words out of my mouth were, "Why the fuck do you want to come and work for me?" And he just sat there astounded.
That's a good interview question. I like that.
But I could get away with that in the Middle East. I couldn't do it here.
No.
But I wanted to see what his reaction was. And it was 2 minutes of general chit chat. Okay, mate, you've got the job. Within 5 minutes, he had the job because he was the type of character that could respond to what I'd said to him. But I'm not that type of character. But I just wanted to test him out. And this is broadcast go public. Callum Cameron, That's you, mate. And I'll spend it once you put this out. I'll get Colin to see it, and he'll probably endorse that. We were very good mates. He's back in the UK demolishing bloody power stations at the minute.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all about people. I think if like say, work at senior level, and you convince the people that the regional board level and the executive board level, that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, they trust you to go on and do it. Yeah,
definitely. So as you said, COVID hit, and obviously you made the decision to come back to the UK. So what are you up to nowadays?
I've got my own little freelancing business, HSCQ One Stop. So it was something I always wanted to try, for many years, and it's more about the cost-effective consulting. There's lots of ways of being able to be a consultant. Giving small businesses advice with, cost effectively. If I do it for one business, I can just generally tend to repeat. Every business is different, when you work with them. But health and safety doesn't have to cost a fortune. You just have to get the right people to give you the right advice, and then relationships, as businesses grow, relationships grow, and then you support them a little bit more. So I just wanted to give them a one-price solution. To take them forward and actually take health and safety on. And really the message there is, health and safety doesn't have to cost a lot. If you get the right people supporting you.
It costs a lot more if you get it wrong.
Hell of a lot more. We've all seen those stories, haven't we? And I think more scaffolders than anything else these days, isn't it? Getting the old fines. Yeah,
there's a lot of that. I mean, I don't know if that's because, obviously HSE are much more constricted in terms of their activities because of budget cuts over the last decade. So whether they had a bit of a campaign again, in that sort of sector, I don't know, and that's what's resulting in these fines. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not so sure myself, but you don't see as much activity these days as you used to. Maybe the last year and a half from COVID has not really helped that situation. Who knows?
No, although as I understand it, I won't say who, but I was told by somebody in an insurer that, and I'm sure it's true, HSE have now subcontracted some enforcement or investigatory work out to some companies who are going in and doing these kind of COVID, are you COVID secure visits, but being slightly more heavy-handed than a HSE inspector, who typically are pretty helpful, in the round, are typically pretty helpful and pragmatic. In the first instance, and then obviously if you come back and then you haven't fixed it, it's a different matter. But they seem to be coming in and doing more, but perhaps with a bit more rigor, rightly or wrongly, than they were before.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, they sit under the Department of Works and Pensions now, don't they? Yeah, so I think there may be issues around funding there. Who knows? But I think there should be more of them. There should be more out of them, more out there. It's shocking what you see out there now. I picked my daughter up from school a couple of weeks ago, and these guys putting the solar panels on, and it was like, oh my god, just waiting for it to happen. Even the dodgy window cleaner next door, you're thinking, oh god, please don't, and he's got the long reach, but because they've got an extension, they need to do the Velux window, so he has to climb on the roof to get the Velux, and I'm thinking, please don't fall in my garden. I know I'm insured, but please don't fall in. But you can't save the world, because these guys will probably brick at you sometimes as soon as after you look at you, you think, who the hell are you? And I think that's some of the issue out there as well, is the generalized attitude towards it as well, health and safety.
Yeah, there's still this kind of health and safety gone mad kind of misperception, isn't there? And I think that's we still got to work hard to overcome that with a lot of people.
But we're human. We get drunk.
We're
normal people, and these finger wagging days and all of that. Well, that's the type of person you don't really want. The person you do want is the person that actually knows what they're talking about. and actually help people through a process or a crisis or, the way they need to do things, and it doesn't always have to cost thousands of pounds. It can be simple solutions which will make you compliant and defend yourselves, if something goes wrong.
Yeah, to me, I mean, you know this, but my attitude is always to try and spin it into a positive message around, the benefits that it can bring. And yeah, of course, you have to talk about the fines and the accidents and the serious injuries and stuff, because that's what does get people's attention. If you look at SHP, they do on LinkedIn and I'm sure other social media, they do a post, once a month saying, here are the top read stories on SHP this month, and it's always the fines that are the most read. So, you have to sort of start somewhere. But I think actually it's about, it's about the positivity of it and looking at it as an enabler.
Yeah, it's simple, isn't it? I mean, do this, avoid this. Do it right, avoid the fines and the misery. I think people dying and the injuries. But I also think the market doesn't help it. The market's driving competitiveness and cheap costs, and people who are out there trying to win work. I know there seems to be a great influx or increase in building works and people renovations and all of that, but I think the market actually drives that as well. And I was chatting to some people about that the other week, and I think the market is definitely driving the accident rates as well. Cheapest price wins. Obviously, cut corners. Things are going to happen.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that's a risk, obviously, with what's happened to the economy with COVID, because everybody's, for example, last summer we were incredibly busy doing not our slips and falls work, but deep cleaning work. So kind of deep cleaning, disinfecting, leisure centres and whatever. And we got testimonials from those companies and really happy with our work and so on and so forth. And then cycle forwards to sort of January, February, March this year, when those buildings were sort of about to reopen again, and you kind of go, well, do you want us to come back in and do the same again? No, we're okay. We'll be okay. Or and that's driven, by a bit of perhaps a bit of lackadaisical attitude, maybe, but I think a lot of it driven by the financial situation of, the government support was enough to get people through to last summer, but it wasn't enough to get people through now. And so if there's no money, then of course you're gonna cut some not cut corners, that's the wrong word, but you're gonna be looking at what you're spending much more closely, aren't you, and go for cheaper options probably.
Yeah, cheaper options. I mean, because your business is quite unique, isn't it? I don't think I've ever heard of another business like yours in the UK.
There are other companies. The main thing that we do that others don't is we do marketing, and we have some of these big partnerships which others don't. So we have that kind of positioning in the marketplace, which is great. But there are some other companies doing kind of similar sorts of things, not exactly the same, but similar sorts of things.
Yeah, but not marketing very well.
No, not marketing very well, and perhaps not taking as long-term a view, shall we say? But fair play to them. They're running their business. I'll run my business, and we'll see how it goes in the end. I'm pretty comfortable with the way that we're doing things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So if people want to get in touch with you then, Tom, to have a chat and see if there's anything you can help them with, what's the best way of sort of following you or contacting you or whatever it might be?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously the website, hscq1stop.com, or if you want to send me an email, you can either just drive it through my LinkedIn profile or support@hscq1stop.com. Bit of a mouthful, that one. But yeah, it's a small business. There's some good work coming through that. I want to be unique. I didn't want to get out of the house too much, but now I do. 9 months of being behind the scenes and looking at the daisies or the dandelions in my garden and keep walking out and digging the bloody things up. It's a nice business to be in. We want to be cost effective, and again, to people out there, there's no one size fits all. Give us a shout. We'll have a quick talk. We can help. If you want free advice, we'll give you free advice. You don't have to buy anything off us. And if you want any support going forward, we'll take you through a journey.
Perfect. Great. Well, I'm sure you'll get some inquiries. Well, hopefully you'll get some inquiries from this. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, particularly about the Middle East, but also some of the stuff and attitudes going on here. It's been great. And for those in the audience, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do give us some likes and comments on social media, and hit subscribe and give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, because that helps to spread the word and let other people know about the podcast. Thanks a lot, Tom, and we'll see you all on the next episode next week.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate. All right. Cheers, Christian.
Cheers.
Stay safe. Stay safe, everybody.